Hello, and welcome to a new episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. I'm your host, Margaret Edwards, and this week we are joined by Rebecca Bowman to take some questions from you, our audience. So let me just introduce Rebecca real quickly. Rebecca is our Senior Director for Ethics and Professional Practice here at NSPE. She's been on the team here for just over a year and joins us after a long career as a licensed PE and as a licensed attorney. So Rebecca, welcome to Committee Corner.
Well, thank you, Margaret. I'm delighted to be here, but I'm even more excited that your faithful audience and our members have come up with some questions that they want us to follow up on.
Yeah, I'm so excited for that as well. So let's just dive right in. As long as I can find my mouse, there we go. So yeah, now it's time to answer some questions from you, our NSP members and audience here in the Committee Corner. So the first one started off nice and easy. This question is, what is your favorite issue on Capitol Hill to follow for NSPE? So I'll jump in first. My favorite issue to follow is definitely anything related to emerging technologies. I kind of just enjoy it because it's something new, it's something exciting, and it's something that, Congress is having conversations about. And, particularly from an NSPE standpoint, it's a great place for professional engineers to have an impact and really shape what technologies are being created, and, particularly from, public safety standpoint. So that's something that's exciting for that. I mean, I just also think it's cool because they're new things, especially, as new technologies kind of being rolled out every single day, and just like that imagination and creativity that's there. So Rebecca, I don't know if you want to take a stab at this question.
Well, I have a whole number of soapboxes in my life that I tend to step up on, and one of them is clean, safe water. And so that's an issue I like to follow on the Hill, whether it's managing runoff or getting rid of lead pipes or whatever, but clean, safe water is a real big thing for me.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I think, especially now with, the conversation around infrastructure, as well as I think, the Build Back Better bill that's being talked about, there's a lot of ways to insert, particularly NSPE and, engineers into that conversation that is happening, which is great. So the next question, speaking of the infrastructure bill, what's up with it? So last month, President Biden signed into law the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And that is the bipartisan infrastructure bill that we've been following here at NSPE for quite a while now. And, what you've seen communications from us on the, government relations and advocacy team about, ways to contact your legislators. And at this point, since it's been signed into law, we're now focusing on the implementation of the bill. We haven't really seen much yet because, federal agencies are still kind of wrapping their hands around it whenever it comes to what funding they get to distribute out to folks. So that's something that you should definitely stay tuned as, we explore that, we talk about it, we, present those opportunities to you to kind of get a bigger picture of what's happening with the implementation of the bill.
One of the good things about it is that it does not involve the creation of new bureaucracy. Too many times I see bills like this and a big chunk of the resources get sucked up into new bureaucracy. That's not the case here. The funds are going out to agencies that already exist, that already have projects in mind. So I'm hoping that this will get deployed pretty quickly and efficiently. So I'm looking forward to watching that unfold.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for adding that, Rebecca. Our next question. So this is the question. As data becomes an important fabric on how engineers design, build, operate, maintain, and sustain our society, how are PEs playing a larger role in technologies such as artificial intelligence, machine learning, the Internet of Things or IoT, automation, and robotics to protect the public health, safety, and welfare? Rebecca, do you want to kind of lead this one off?
Sure. One of the things that I think flows from the emerging technologies, which are identified here, is that the engineer can no longer go sit in the corner and do the same thing the engineer did the first day he or she got out of school. What we're seeing now is that the PE is called upon to be much more multidisciplinary, whether they are gaining those skills on their own or whether they're working in teams to fill the gaps in, but it's much more multidisciplinary than it used to be.
Yeah, I think that's great, especially looking at, how, and I think, one, being that we're engineers and, NSPE, the qualified engineering team, working together as PEs, but also, licensed or certified, engineering technicians and technologists, and how, the full engineering team, I think really will also play a role in, ensuring the public is protected within these, new and emerging technologies. I can also speak to kind of how, NSPE, we're gonna, keep playing a role in this conversation. And, we're gonna keep talking about how, federal agencies and, legislators, as they're, writing legislation or creating regulation around emerging technologies, how the professional engineer is going to be so critical in ensuring that the public is protected. And so we're going to keep advocating to have a PE involved in the development and deployment. Whenever, if we're looking back to our emerging technologies policy guide, looking at a third party verification system and bringing that in, and introducing that as part of like the development and deployment process. So we're certainly going to be there and, have a voice in the conversation.
I think another aspect of it is that Congress will act if there's some massive public disaster. But PEs can come to the party and help Congress understand the issues before there's massive property loss or massive loss of life, which means we can, by stepping forward, help the Congress be ahead of the curve instead of chasing the disaster. Mm-hmm. And I think that's huge.
Yeah, no, that's great. And thank you for adding that, Rebecca. Cool. So moving on to our next question. Since we're at the end of 2021, this question asks, when will Congress get back to work in the new year? So officially, the House will be back in session January 10th. And of course, that's not to say that Congress has completely checked out for 2021. The Senate is in session today. I think the House also might. But there's, still work that they need to do on other legislative issues, none really, particularly related to, NSPE and our policy priorities. But so Congress still has some work to do. So we're hoping, I don't at least have an expectation that any of our issues will be, either worked on, whether, good worked on or bad worked on before the end of the year. So kind of, January 10th for the House, the Senate will probably be back around a similar time. And so that's whenever we're really going to, hit the ground running in the new year, whenever it comes to what we're following on the Hill and, what issues and seeing the issues that are at play, particularly if they're related to any of our priorities here at NSPE.
And just because the Congress may be on a brief hiatus, doesn't mean that work isn't going on. That interactions with staffers might be more accessible. There may be comments open, and that doesn't even speak to what's going on in the states. So there's never an end. There's never a stop.
You're exactly right. Things are happening, whether or not, votes are happening on the floor of either chamber in Congress. There's always, staff, like you said, is doing work. Staff is still around. I know that we might have touched on this, earlier this year with Committee Corner, particularly whenever we talked about August recess, that, yes, the members are home in their districts, but, staff here in DC are still, working on those legislative issues. It might not be as, fast moving of a time on that, but they're still doing work. They're still, meeting with constituents. They're still listening to constituent concerns. So even though the session might not officially start until, the second week of January, like we're still going to be here following, issues and kind of getting ready to hit the ground running. So that's what you have to look forward to in 2022, at least. So great. Kind of, on a related note, how can professional engineers begin creating relationships with their members of Congress and or their staff? Kind of before, Rebecca, I'm going to kind of start off this one. Before, I think looking at the how, I think it's, good to throw this out there that it's, equally and maybe if not more important to build relationships with your legislative staff, in addition to the member themselves. Because, legislative staff, they're the ones who are working on the issues, and really advising the member of Congress on maybe how to vote on a particular piece of legislation, or, really be the one representing a constituent voice to the member themselves. So a way that PEs can begin creating the relationships are, simply by taking action in the NSPE Advocacy Center. We have campaigns that are, a really easy and simple way to begin making that contact with your congressional offices, whether it's with your member of the House or either or both or either of your senators. And that, is a great jumping off point to, say, go to your office, even if it's, calling or going into a district office of, hi, I wrote in to, Congressman X or Senator Y about this issue. And I'm a, professional engineer who lives in your district. This is why it's important to me. And, kind of continue that conversation off of that first initial interaction. And it's something that, is not the most difficult thing, or, even just regularly contacting your offices. And Rebecca, I think whenever we were talking earlier, you kind of hinted at some idea of how to kind of keep doing that, even if there's not, a constant legislative issue or legislative ask to make. So I'll let you talk about that.
Okay, well, there are two aspects there. One of them is an aspect of human nature. If the first time I talk to you is to ask you for something, you're not going to be quite as engaged in fulfilling my needs. On the other hand, if you know who I am already and have a reason to respect and value my opinion, then when I do need to come in for an ask, you're more willing to listen. And that's going to be true. I mean, that's human nature. So it's going to be true for the staff as well. The other thing is, as we read journals, and we all read different journals. So as we read our journals and we electronically clip an article and say, oh, Margaret, I think this would be really interesting to you. You can do that with the congressional staff too. When you find out what the portfolios are, and so you're not sending it to the totally wrong person, keep in touch. I don't know about you, but if you roll off the bottom of my email screen, I can forget something. So if I'm sending you communications over time, then I kind of stay at the top of your email screen. And that's always a good way to make that connection as well.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. If it's not at the top of my inbox, it's potentially on its way out the door, and to the back burner of my mind. So
right.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that kind of helpful tidbit. And also just extending the offer that we as NSPE staff, we're here to help you with that. If you have any questions of beyond just us kind of talking through it today, any questions or any interest in creating relationships with your members of Congress, let us know. Send us an email, and we can certainly help you start down that journey. So we are here to help. We're just not some talking heads on a screen. We're here to help, and especially if you want to be involved, we're happy to have you and want to do what we can to help you succeed. So yes, that's kind of my piece for that. So the next question, when it comes to submitting public comments, where do I start? I think this is a great question to kind of answer after talking about how can I start engaging with my members of Congress. This is like step beyond that, and I think focusing more on federal agencies, but it's something that we can do that isn't all that, too difficult. I know, Rebecca, like you've been really on the public comment train. If you want to start off this question, and I can
Okay.
come in after.
You asked earlier what I like to pay attention to on Capitol Hill. Well, that really starts here too. If I've got a particular soapbox issue, then it behooves me to pay attention to what's going on in the agency that deals with that soapbox issue. So check out on their website on a periodic basis. Most of the federal agencies actually have a public comment tab or a public comment partial screen down one side or something. So if you care about an issue, check in with the agency and just be prepared to make public comments. Of course, that requires a detailed reading of whatever we're going to comment about. But if you're invested in the issue, then invest yourself in finding out what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And depending on what kind of time people have on their hands, can always comb through the Federal Register on a daily basis. I don't recommend it. It can be a lot, but if you're really bored one day and I want to go check what's on, in the Federal Register, that's also another place to go and look for, opportunities for public comment and kind of to see what's happening outside of the halls of Congress, but still, within the federal agencies and within the government. So.
And the other thing is, if you're motivated to provide a personal public comment and you think that NSPE should be on that particular train, then get a hold of Margaret or me, and we'll run that up the flagpole because your comments are incredibly important. But an official comment from NSPE could have a little more oomph to it. So if you think we should be involved in something, let us know, and we'll run it up the flagpole. I know I said that twice, but I can't think of a better analogy.
Yeah. And one thing, Rebecca, that just came into my mind that I think is valuable to throw out there is, you guys as professional engineers have a certain subject matter expertise in whichever area of engineering you practice. And that is extremely valuable to whether it's a federal agency in the form of a public comment, or, and just offering yourself as a resource to your members of Congress. And, it's possible that their staff is probably all political science type folks. And, it might be helpful to have just, knowing that they have a constituent they can turn to if there is a more, technical, engineering type question that they need help with. And that's another way to build a relationship and, with a rapport with staff, with a member, because they know that you are there as a resource if they ever need you, which is quite possible, especially if we're, going back to emerging technologies. There's so much that evolves within that space, and, knowing that there's somebody there who has the public's interest in mind, through, holding paramount the public health, safety, and welfare, that's almost like could be like a guiding North Star, somebody who has that, that obligation, those principles, and, really does put the public first.
Absolutely. And the other thing is, be patient. Do not expect that you're going to make one phone call, and from that point on, you're going to be the recognized expert in that congressperson's office. No. So be patient. As with many relationships like that, you may find that it takes a year or 2 years of relatively steady communication before you're in the file folder as a resource to be used. So stick with it. It's worth it.
Yeah, it definitely is. So I think we're ready to move on to the next question. Oh, I think this is our final question. So the question is, any congressional fun facts to share? So one thing that I always like, talking about and sharing is, so quick, backstory. Whenever I was in college, I was a congressional intern. So I, interned in my member of Congress's office. And one thing that I did as an intern was give Capitol tours to constituents who came in and visited. And one of my, this isn't, procedure or like legislative related, but it's a fun fact nonetheless, is that the Statuary Hall, which was the old House chamber, has, it's the way that like the room is shaped, it's like the ellipse and like the whispering kind of spots. And so the story that I always like to tell whenever in Statuary Hall with, folks, giving them tours, is that John Quincy Adams, so after he was president, he went back to Congress and served in the House of Representatives, and he would put his head down on his desk to exclusively listen to the conversations that were happening on the other side of the aisle, all the way on the other side of the room, because his desk was in the perfect spot to pick up that conversation without having to stand, right next to these people and, listen in like this. All he had to do was put his head down on his desk, and that was it.
So much for confidentiality. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So anyways, that's always something fun that I like to share with people, but yeah, it's a fun fact, I guess.
That meets my test.
Yeah. Well, cool. I think that is our last question. So Rebecca, first off, thank you to you for joining us today. It was great having you, and I'm happy that you could provide your perspective, particularly as a professional engineer, to answering our questions today. So thank you.
I was delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So that concludes this episode of NSPE's Committee Corner. This is our final episode of 2021. So it's a little bittersweet, but we're going to be back, better than ever in 2022 with some new and exciting content. And if there are any, maybe issues that you would like to see us cover in here in Committee Corner, please feel free to email us at governmentrelations@nspe.org. And we will do our best to try to, address any questions or any issues or any topics that you would like to see us cover in 2022. And you can find the Committee Corner in the NSPE Advocacy Center or on the NSPE YouTube page. Thank you.